Hello, everybody. Welcome to another session of Lunch and Learn with Geo. Um, Today, we're going to be talking about collecting evidence from mobile devices and e-discovery. E-discovery, one of my favorite topics. And we have two interesting speakers who I've worked with before, Dave Hendershot and Stacy Casimir. They really know their stuff, and they're going to walk us through mobile device collection.
All right. Well, thank you very much, George. Like George had said, we're doing a presentation on mobile evidence in e-discovery, specifically collection and analysis. Just a little bit of background about myself. I've been in digital forensics for 26 years. I got my start off in law enforcement as a civilian investigator for the digital forensics unit there. I hold multiple certifications. I have testified as an expert, and I have an extremely large number of training hours in this field.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stacy Cashmere. I'm Disco's Forensics Operations Manager. My master's degree, fun fact, is in forensic entomology. Yes, that's right. It's bugs and dead bodies. I was a crime scene investigator for Austin Police Department here in Texas for a number of years before moving to the private sector, where I managed a private digital crime lab. We mostly worked with law enforcement and also worked civil cases. And then I've been at Disco for going on 7 years. Started out as a client success manager, but my goal was always to get back to forensics. So when Dave joined the team, we built our forensics team here at Disco, and the rest has been history. So thank you for having me.
Welcome.
All right. So today's agenda, we're going to first discuss, how do we collect? So forensically sound data extraction of mobile devices. Mobile devices include phones and tablets most commonly. Second, we're going to talk about, challenges of certain types of third-party chat applications and how to make sure we collect them and get them preserved. There are some challenges with Signal, Telegram, and other specific chat applications that we'll kind of dive into for you later in the presentation. We'll also talk about best practices for user activity analysis of phones and tablets to ensure that everything stays defensible throughout the process. And lastly, we're going to bridge the gap. So how do we align technical forensic collections with e-discovery requirements so that you experience a seamless workflow when engaging an e-discovery vendor? So what is digital forensics? This might be kind of a new concept to a lot of folks, and that's okay. That's why we're here. So digital forensics is the process of identifying, preserving, collecting, and analyzing electronically stored information, commonly known as ESI, in a way that's forensically sound and admissible in a court of law. So digital forensic services may include preservation of the data to make sure nothing's lost, collection of the data, which just goes hand in hand with preservation. We can sometimes recover deleted artifacts or deleted data where needed and where it's actually possible. We can perform user activity analysis. How is the user interacting with the phone or the tablet? We can report on those findings if needed to tell a story for you that you can relay to the court. And we do offer expert testimony. So a forensics expert generally has testified either in writing and or in person a number of times. So they know how to work that side of things, make sure everything is real clean and makes sense for written and oral testimony. Objectives and scope. So forensics, digital forensics aims to reconstruct events. Like I said, tell a story of what happened, potentially recover deleted or encrypted artifacts, and establish timelines for you. When was this person talking about this or forwarding that? What was the timeline? It involves analyzing devices such as computers, smartphones, which we're talking about today, servers, and other storage media. How does this play a role in e-discovery? Well, we have to locate and secure the ESI. That's the first and foremost most important thing. Make sure we do a comprehensive collection, aka preservation, so that nothing is missed. As I always like to say, a deficient collection will often lead to a deficient production. So it's essential that we get everything up front in a comprehensive manner. We also protect the integrity of the data. We make sure that it's transferred, i.e., collected without any alteration. We don't want to change that metadata because that could lead to scrutiny down the line, which we don't want. And lastly, and most importantly, defensibility. By engaging a third-party digital forensics expert to do the collections and/or analysis, it ensures that everything's documented during the collection process so that if they have to go back and answer questions, if they're cross-examined as to how they collected the data, there's no question everything was done defensively and it was documented properly.
All right, perfect. So let's get into mobile device collection. First, just a little overview, the core requirements for these types of collections. First, it needs to be forensically sound and admissible in court. It needs to be a file system extraction, or we can capture the artifact databases such as the SMSDB, or perhaps another SQLite or database belonging to other messaging apps or other artifacts on those devices. Something that we cannot do at the time of collection is capturing individual messages. So we get this request all the time where we only need this one conversation from this one phone. Unfortunately, just due to the limitations of forensic tools and making sure that we're doing everything defensible, it's just not in the cards at the current moment. And then the selection, essentially the scope for those collections need to be suited to the particular project. So if you only need native messages, obviously we would only export the native messages. Or if we're looking for something more detailed, such as information that would be within a more comprehensive extraction, then we would have to do that as well.
Hey, David, what do you mean by native message?
Native message, essentially your text messages from the phone that come natively on that device. So if you're talking about an Apple device, we're talking about iMessage. If you're talking about an Android, we're talking about the Message app, as opposed to a third-party app such as WhatsApp, WeChat, Signal, Telegram, those types of things would not be essentially the native messaging app. So we have essentially two ways of extracting data. First is the most comprehensive, essentially having to crack or hack the phone in order to unlock this area, is the full file system extraction. This is the recommended way to extract mobile devices. If you're in doubt, this is what you want to ask for. There are limitations, such as if you're on the latest and greatest OS, or you have a brand new device, it just came out, sometimes the forensic software needs time to catch up with those things. So if you have a case, make sure to tell them, hey, turn off your automatic updates, just so that we can ensure to get the correct data we need. And then secondly is the logical or the cloud extraction. So this is essentially a glorified backup, or honestly a backup. We have used iTunes, we have used iTunes-like applications, and we have used software such as Celebrite Advanced Logicals, which essentially use the same engine to grab that data. So what that won't get is essentially the parts of the phone only presented to the user, as opposed to everything. So you are going to miss out on some important data, depending upon the type of case you have. So let's talk about Apple phones. So there are a couple of backup methods. First, iTunes backup. We have an iCloud backup. And then we have essentially doing different types of extraction. So there's that advanced logical using Celebrite, which is essentially a glorified iTunes backup. And then we have that full file system extraction. And like I said, this is what you want to get to ensure that you are getting everything that you possibly could get. But like I said, it is dependent on the model of the phone and the version of the OS. When you definitely want to ask for this is when you are considering doing any type of analysis, because it is going to get you the databases needed to essentially draw out those artifacts that are going to tell the story of what's going on that device. So some other things to know are the native messages, like I was saying, the iMessages. If they have been deleted now in the later OS or operating systems that they have released, you can pull those out and recover those as long as they've been deleted within 30 days. A nice little tidbit of that is it actually logs if this was a system deletion or a user deletion. So you are getting some intel on that. And you can look for other sources of the same backup, such as other devices or old devices. You can also look for data within the iCloud backups. So we've had cases where the current phone and device doesn't have the particular messages or conversations that we are looking for, and we have to explore other options to see if we can't find those, such as, maybe they backed it up to their computer, they backed it up to the iCloud, or when they switched devices, they just left the old phone there and it has all the nice data still on it.
David, when you say that deletions can still be recovered after 30 days.
Yes.
Where would they be stored and saved for that period of time?
So what they've actually done is they've created another table within their SMS database. It's SMSDB in the phone file name, essentially. And they've created a new table called recently deleted. And what happens is it's essentially on a timer. So if you reach that 30 days, it permanently deletes that message. So it's not necessarily something forensic, but it is a nice little tidbit to know when you're dealing with Apple devices. So if you get a phone and you find out, hey, all these relevant messages are deleted yesterday, that's a big, lights going off.
So it becomes really important to make sure that we get the device as quickly as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if you're an iPhone user, you can actually test what Dave's describing. If you go to your phone and you go to your native messages application, up in the left corner, depending on what iOS you have, it'll be featured and what your settings are. But there's an icon that says Edit in the top left corner. And if you click Edit, you can see Show Recently Deleted. And that'll show your recently deleted messages. And it says, they'll be there for about 30 days and you can try to recover them all from there.
But again, the key is to get it within the 30-day period.
Which is really hard. That's a challenge, correct? But that's the only way we're really...
Is 30 days the default?
It's pretty much the rule. So there's no way to change that from a user's perspective. I'm sure there is a way to change it if you want to get into the nitty gritty of the phone, but there is no, keep deleted messages forever or anything like that. Yeah. Something to know. So when we're dealing with an iTunes backup or even a Celebrite extraction, the physical device itself is required. However, the iCloud collection is 100% remote. And we'll go over the pitfalls of the iCloud collection. It used to be wonderful. Well, I wouldn't say wonderful. It used to be very nice to not have to deal with actual physical devices. But
This was printed twice. It was one of Pete's statements.
during scoping, make sure that you specify what artifacts you need. And if you come to us, we are going to ask these questions. Essentially, what are you looking from this device? What are the things that have been asked of you? Usually it's communications, call logs, voicemails, things of that nature. So let's talk about Android. These are a completely different beast. Unlike Apple, these have multiple manufacturers. None of them have any kind of standard across the entire platform. So there is no iTunes backup equivalent. There is no iCloud equivalent. So we're going down to that Celebrite collection. So we're either going to need to do a logical or a full file system extraction. And like I said, you definitely want to, when we're dealing with Androids, if you can get a full file extraction, get it, because doing those logicals, it doesn't give you that file system that you definitely want when you're doing, your review, essentially.
What is Celebrite? For those who don't know.
Celebrite is a mobile. Well, it's actually a full suite of forensic tools. It is typically, it came out when people were doing mobile. It's been around for maybe 20 years now, for moving information from one phone to another, I think is how it got its start. But it's essentially a analysis, collection, forensic mobile device tool. So there's different applications. They call it Insights now, Celebrite Insights, physical analyzers. So that's what you take your extraction, put it into so that you can investigate or export the needed materials out of the extraction. And then we have Insights UFED, which is the collection tool, either through a full file system or even an advanced logical.
Thank you.
So, like I said, there are options for targeted app collection on some models. We don't recommend it because there is that potential of missing something. But if you're very sure that you only need you only need the messages, you don't need anything else from that phone, and you're 100% sure, then great. We can absolutely give that a run and pull just that information. But in my experience, usually when you're very sure about those things, sometime down the road, the scope changes just a little bit and you're back at the device having to do a recollection. All right. So let's talk about that full file extraction. So this is the most comprehensible collection possible for Android devices. It is merited when you're doing forensic analysis, and it supports only certain makes and models, and you can't target specific types of data. So when you're capturing this information, just like Apple iPhones, you are getting that entire file system. So something to look out on the horizon is all of these companies are trying to pull into that targeted collection where they can say, we only need this or that conversation, or we need this particular artifact. And there are companies that are attempting that. Unfortunately, it's just not there yet to back it with forensics methodology. But I have no doubt that they will eventually get it there. And then also, when we do the entire capture of the device, we can filter for specific things, certain conversations, certain artifacts, just like we can with an Apple device.
All right. I do want to make sure, Marty, did I answer your question in the chat? You asked about 2-year-old texts from an iPhone that have not been deleted. So if they're on the device and the user can see them, Marty, then yes, they will be included in the collection. If they've been deleted, then no, they will not be. Meaning if the user cannot see those on the phone itself, then we do have to explore those other avenues that Dave touched on. Syncing to a Mac device, a Mac computer, or a tablet per se, or look at prior iCloud backups from other devices. Good. Okay. Perfect. Thanks, Marty. So let's talk about how we collect the cell phones. I'm sure that folks are like, well, how do you go about doing this? Dave said you have to give up the phone and, we actually have to have physical custody of it kind of thing. And that's one of the most common questions that we get here at Disco. Do I have to give up my phone? Well, the answer is no, but sort of. So the way that we do these collections is we ship a Celebrite mobile collection kit to the custodian. This is not a self-collection. If the custodian was collecting his or her own device, you wouldn't need us and you wouldn't need forensic software. So this is not a self-collection. It's minimal action by the custodian. So what we do is we ship a kit that looks like this. We've had people say it looks like a bomb's inside of it when it's delivered. It's kind of daunting, but inside of this big Pelican case is what you see here on the right side of the screen. So we have a laptop computer. We have a hardware encrypted evidence drive. This is where the collected data is actually going to be stored. Heaven forbid it get lost in transit, through FedEx. No one can access the data because it's PIN code protected. Okay, it also has the cables for Celebrite, depending on the type of phone we're collecting. Those cables will be used to connect the device to the laptop. What happens is the expert will meet with the custodian remotely via Zoom once they receive this big old kit. And then our examiner will walk them through unlocking the kit, setting up the computer, connecting the encrypted drive, and connecting their phone to it. That's all the custodian does, connect some things and turn on the computer. At that point, the expert will take remote control of the computer and facilitate the extraction of the phone. That way, the expert owns the burden of defensibility in testimony. This is not a self-collection. So I want to make that very clear because we get asked that quite a bit. Okay, but that's what the kits look like. All right, so we have a couple different types of collection kits. So Dave touched on Celebrite, the mobile device industry standard forensics tool for collection and analysis of phones and tablets. We can also do, depending on what data is needed from the phone. So if only native text messages are needed from an iPhone, we can get an iTunes backup. This is generally cheaper, it's a bit easier, it goes quicker for the custodian. During the extraction process, the custodian cannot use his device. Okay, our expert is going to be doing the collection. Once it's finished, she will email him, letting him know, hey, your phone is done collecting, you can use it as normal. But that is the only thing that causes some heartburn for custodians is, I can't use my phone for several hours. They just can't, or it'll fail, and then we got to start back from square one, and we don't want to have to do that. So this is an examiner-led iTunes backup collection. So again, if no crazy third-party applications are needed like Signal and Telegram, or if you do not require user activity analysis, then we can just get an iTunes backup. It leverages the native Apple backup protocol, again, a glorified backup essentially of the data on the phone. It can be saved to the forensics laptop. We can sometimes target certain data on the phone. If you only need native messages, we can get those and such. And then we do maintain defensible chain of custody. So I get asked that quite often, well, since we're shipping this kit to the custodian, how does the chain of custody work? Well, the phone never leaves the custodian's custody, so that's not an issue. The chain of custody will be kept for the data that we save to that encrypted hard drive I described earlier. So the custodian will sign off on the receipt, hey, I have the encrypted drive in my custody. They sign off on that. They include it in the return kit to us, and we keep track of that and continue to fill it out throughout the life of that encrypted hard drive's life at our lab. So chain of custody is maintained. Again, we get asked that quite often, so I wanted to make that clear. Next, Dave. So iCloud collections, this is what Dave touched on earlier. So our gold standard, if you will, and it was so nice because the custodians didn't really have to do much at all. for iPhone collections. Again, if only native messages were needed, we didn't need any Signal or Telegram or user activity analysis performed, we could just collect it from the cloud, which is cheaper and easier because we did not have to ship any kits. So what we would do is basically our expert would meet with a custodian. She would share her screen and allow the custodian to input his iCloud credentials. A two-factor authentication code would be sent to his phone. He'd give that to our expert to input, and voila, the collection would commence. So it was really easy. We didn't have to ship a kit. The custodian was never unable to use his device for any period of time. But we started to experience, some security and access challenges through Apple. So due to Apple's evolving security protocols, and there were also some regional controls as to where, the access was coming from, iCloud backup collections are a thing of the past, unfortunately. And the reason we want to bring this up is we do get asked about this quite often. Why can't you just collect from the cloud? Well, it's because of Apple's security settings. So please blame Apple, don't shoot us. The critical risks that we experienced were the custodian would get locked out of their iCloud account, which you can imagine what a mess that would turn into. So we didn't want to cause any lack of access by the custodian to their account. That was caused some heartburn. Apple security often prevents third-party access, so it makes it the least reliable option for collection of phone data. And it's really a last resort policy. Remote kits for iTunes or Celebrite extractions are now the preferred gold standard over iCloud collection. So thanks for nothing, Apple. Kind of ruined our iCloud collections, but it's okay.
All right, so let's talk about what's possible / recommended at the time of collection. So when you're definitely going to want to collect the entire mobile device, if that's in the cards for you in a particular case. All forensic collection methods require a capture of the entire file system or artifact databases, like we discussed earlier. And like we discussed earlier as well, selecting a single conversation or message is just not possible at the time of collection. So selecting a collection method that is best suited for your project. First, if any analysis is required beyond the collection of the data or content, the most comprehensive collection supported should be obtained, which is typically a full file system extraction. If the project requires only collection of standard data content, such as native messages, call logs, voicemails, photos, those types of things, then we can move to a less robust collection, which would be the advanced logical iTunes backup situation. So options for once we have the data collected, but before it goes into your review platform. So first, we can filter by date. And this is very handy to narrow your scope. We can also filter by data type, such as I need the messages, the contacts, I need documents, I need photos, I need voicemails. I don't need anything after that. And then we can also filter by conversation based on the phone numbers. So we'll get this request all the time and say, we want to include every conversation with this particular number, but we don't want to include any conversation with him or her and their spouse. And we can do that to make sure that we're only pulling out information that is relevant to your matter. We also do a suppression of header only or blank messages. So when you do these collections, you'll see that there are entries that are essentially blank. They'll say on this date and time, nobody sent nobody something with no message. So we make sure we pull those out so you don't have to look at a bunch of blank messages. And then also analysis of artifacts and databases for evidence of deleted messages. And we're going back to that recently deleted, and Android has a very similar system as well. And then we can also perform investigative searches to find key conversations. Let's say you don't want to put the entire thing into your review platform, but you just need to know, hey, who's talking about, Phoenix? We can do a quick search for Phoenix and pull out conversations based off of that. So that is what essentially an investigative search is. But something that we don't do is keyword searching and only pulling out, conversations or messages that contain certain keywords. Like the forensic software isn't built for that kind of situation. Also, you're going to want to make sure that all of your data is getting indexed properly inside of a review platform or Ediscovery, a tool that is designed to do those things.
Okay. So now we can move to mobile device forensics. What are the best practices? And I love this topic, probably more than any other one in this whole presentation. So best practice is to perform the most comprehensive collection necessary based on the data that you need. So as we mentioned earlier, if you require user activity analysis to tell what the phone user was doing with the device, how they were interacting with applications, we need to do a full file system extraction through Celebrate, right? That's the most comprehensive collection just to make sure that there's no scrutiny over missing data. If we got an iTunes backup instead of a full file system extraction, we would be limited to what artifacts are available for review. And that would leave us open to scrutiny by opposing counsel or an opposing expert. And we don't want that. So we always say, let's do the most comprehensive collection. Sometimes we get a lot of pushback. Well, I don't want my whole phone collected. Well, I don't want you to get my grandma's secret recipe, for her pie. I've gotten that before. I know you laugh.
That's a real one. Actually.
That's a real one.
I have a better one.
Go for it.
How about the cell phone owner and the computer owner was doing boudoir photography?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. We had that issue.
Yep. But we get it all, right?
David, why are you chuckling?
We had a case where someone essentially said very similar things, and he's like, "You're cool. You can look if you want." It's like, oh God.
We're not going to go look.
No.
No. But we have gotten the grandma's secret pie.
Interest in these things?
Nope.
We've seen it all, Gio. Okay.
Okay.
But yeah, so comprehensive collection. Again, I wouldn't be surprised the attorneys on this call, you will get pushback. Why do you have to collect my whole phone? And that's where, the experts team can chime in and say, hey, look, we are going to handle your data with the utmost, privacy and respect. We're not going to view what's on the phone ourselves. The attorneys have requested communications. So we're going to go in and export the chats, text messages, voicemails, and call logs. All that is just going right into the Ediscovery review platform for review. And our expert's not going to view anything. And your data is secured on an encrypted hard drive. And it usually talks them off the ledge and they'll agree to have their phone collected. Secure retention is also essential, right? So you don't, people say, well, this isn't a criminal case, so it's not that big of a, it is actually just as big of a deal. I don't care if it's civil, criminal, or an arbitration. We need to handle data and retain it in the most secure fashion. So again, from chain of custody all the way through to when the lab receives it and stores it, that chain of custody needs to be retained throughout. It needs to stay in a secure location that has limited access by individuals, and it needs to remain, untouched and preserved in case anyone needs to return to the well later, or if the data is questioned later. The chain of custody and showing it was securely stored can be easily proven. Also, industry standard tools. So oftentimes we get asked, oh, my client found this, phone collector. It's free from the internet and they want to collect the data from the phone. Can we use it? And I say, no. If you really want to be scrutinized later, go for it. But I do not recommend using your own tools because you want to save a buck, because in the end, if you have a good opposing counsel or a judge who's tech savvy, they're going to say, how did you collect this data? It looks like some metadata is missing. The conversations aren't together. Something's wonky. And then the custodian is going to have to testify on the stand. Well, this is how I collected it. Okay, well, was that tool validated to collect what it said it was going to collect? Did it preserve the metadata? No. Well,
metadata. Metadata. Who needs the metadata?
Who needs the metadata? Yeah. And so then that $1 that they wanted to save at the beginning by using this free software, Now I've seen sanctions and fines imposed. I could tell stories for days. And then you have to go back to a forensics expert to collect properly, usually under expedited services, which is generally double. So we want to do things right from the start using industry standard tools that are proven to do what they say they're going to do. And they preserve the metadata and don't change the integrity of the data that is collected. So 3 important things to remember. So mobile device collections, indefensible pitfalls. So the number one thing we see, as I kind of touched on, are improper collection methods. So some like to do targeted self-collection. Again, self-collection of evidence as a former crime scene investigator makes me cringe at my core. I would never want to collect my own evidence, just not great practice, not a great look. But sometimes, again, custodians want to save a buck and they go ahead and try to do screenshots or collect their own data. This risks missing data outside of what just the user selects to hold and retain, right? So you'll have missing context within a conversation. Same thing with screenshots. At my last lab, we had a case where a woman accused a man of basically stalking and threatening her. And she presented what law enforcement thought were actual text messages. This was long ago. And they actually arrested the man based on these screenshots that she had taken. And our lab was able to get engaged by the attorney for the defendant and demonstrate that the woman had fabricated the screenshots. Essentially, she had saved, if you think about it, if you have a phone, you can save a contact name. She had saved his phone number as the contact name entry. So when you look at it, it showed his phone number, but someone else had sent the text to her. Okay. And the phone number was saved in the name as the name. Okay. And so we were able to prove that she completely fabricated all of these harassing, threatening, stalking messages. But think of what those screenshots being admitted as initial evidence by law enforcement. You can imagine what that did to that poor guy's life. I mean, he couldn't go to work. It soils his reputation temporarily. It's hard to come back from that. So as if there are any judges on the call, I strongly encourage you to not allow screenshots as evidence in your court ever. And a lot of judges are really getting up to speed on not allowing it. And I just always think of that example of how easily they are fabricated. And they don't have metadata shown in them. And again, you don't have the context of where these screenshots are within a given conversation. And context is key. Custodian-led exports. So experts cannot testify to messages that were identified by a custodian, right? So if they say, oh, well, these are the only ones of interest, these are the only ones you need. Well, we're not going to be able to testify as to how those were identified as the only responsive ones. So as Dave said, Ediscovery software was created primarily for defensible searching and filtering. So do a comprehensive collection of the data, get all of it into your Ediscovery review platform, so you have the whole picture, not just a snapshot, and then run your searches and filters across all the data to ensure without a doubt that nothing is missed through to production. Lastly, unvalidated software. There's lots of mobile device forensic software coming out. We do test all of them if they are known to possibly be, something that forensic examiners should be using. And there are some that other labs will use that we will not, because we don't believe that their results are repeatable. We don't believe that they're forensically sound. So you must have validated software that is used, i.e., is the software doing what it says it's going to do without changing the data? Okay, why these methods fail? Okay, as I mentioned, you can lose metadata. You also risk spoliation, and you may end up with an incomplete data set. So just reiterating the risks. All right, Dave?
Okay. So challenges with encrypted messaging applications. You'll know that there are applications out there that have something called end-to-end encryption. And what that will do is essentially make those messages very difficult to collect. So we have to actually do a bit more work in order to grab those keys so that we can actually see what that content is. We also have something called ephemeral messaging, which is essentially time to live messages. So after, someone reads it, it disappears after a minute or 2 minutes. So those types of messages, if you're trying to grab those out, depending upon the application, once they're gone, they're gone. There's no way to bring them back. And then also cloud synchronization. Again, we're talking about the iCloud, we're talking about Google Drive. These types of backups are encrypted differently than things on the local device. So it is important, if you are capturing these locations, to ensure that the examiners are also grabbing the keychains or the keys associated with that type of encryption so that you can unlock those.
That's why people use WhatsApp, huh?
A lot of people. I'd say WhatsApp is one of the most common third-party applications that we get asked to collect, honestly, on a daily basis. I'm in charge of scoping all the projects that come in, and we get asked every day, we need WhatsApp.
I wonder why people use WhatsApp.
A lot of times it's to
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I mean, to communicate with people. I don't use it. I don't have it on my phone. I'm probably the only person on this call that doesn't use it. But WhatsApp collection. So messages and media are stored locally in the SQLite database. What does that mean in lay terms? It means that you can get it from just a standard iTunes backup of the phone if it's an iPhone. And so these, a lot of times folks just need native messages, which we talked about, or the native applications like iMessages on an iPhone or SMS and MMS on an Android, and WhatsApp. So we can do a more basic collection. However, as I described a few moments ago, we always do recommend the most comprehensive collection necessary if you think that we need to review or analyze any deleted artifacts. We would want to get the most comprehensive collection possible. But frankly, 90% of the time we just do for iPhones, a basic iTunes backup, and we can get WhatsApp, no problem. There are some critical pre-collection settings, so you need to ensure that cloud backups are enabled and that the device remains in airplane mode, Faraday bag. I'm sure everyone's heard of a Faraday bag to isolate it from the network. We did at my last lab have a criminal case again where we received a device from law enforcement. They had not turn the device in airplane mode despite us instructing them to and keeping it off. And once we powered it on, it was already powered on, sorry. And then we ended up finding out that the custodian had remotely wiped his phone before it came to our lab for extraction, and everything was gone. So again, it's very important to make sure that in certain types of cases, everything is treated with the utmost care to make sure that if you do have a nefarious party on the other side, making sure that we prevent data loss by taking physical care of the device. Signal collection. So you've heard us bring up Signal and Telegram a few times now. Signal is a very unique beast. A lot of people use Signal because it's the most secure messaging app, is what you'll hear a lot of times. Signal collections require what we've talked about as a full file system extraction through Celebrate. Signal's local database is encrypted, so only a full file system extraction will get the data. The problem goes back to what Dave described at the beginning of this, which is full file system extraction. That is the most comprehensive extraction possible through Celebrate. The problem is it's a game of cat and mouse between Apple and Celebrate, if you're looking at an iPhone, for example. Apple will come out with a new iOS version, and then Celebrate has to scramble to get a fix or a patch, if you will, to support that iOS for a full file system extraction. So as you might expect, there's sometimes a little bit of lag on the ability to get a full file system extraction, depending on the model and iOS of the phone or the model and OS of an Android. Okay, so that's a challenge that we face. So sometimes we have to wait, twiddle our thumbs, wait for our Celebrate to get a patch to support that iOS, and then we're like, all right, client, we can move forward. Make sure that your custodian turns off their automatic system update so that it doesn't update to the latest iOS or another iOS when they come out with one, and it just makes sure that we can get what we need to obtain Signal. A physical acquisition or advanced logical method is generally insufficient to get signal. We just can't get into that database described above. And cloud backups don't exist for signal. There's not a desktop application like you have for Telegram. This is literally the only way to get signal. So sometimes we're SOL if the iOS isn't supported, but most of the time, hopefully we can go ahead and get it or be patient and get it once support is released for that iOS. Lastly, Telegram. I've talked about Telegram being a little bit of a challenge as well. So if we want to get it from the phone, we do need to get a full file system extraction. Okay, Telegram has secret chats that use that end-to-end encryption. So they are stored locally and require a deep device level access for recovery, kind of like we talked about with Signal. The common challenge is that secret chats don't sync to other devices. They don't sync to cloud backups. So we can't get an iCloud backup for iPhones, for example, or any Android backups. Data is ephemeral by design. It's meaning it self-destructs, kind of like you think of Snapchat, where they just show up and then they're gone. The messages are gone. So by nature, Telegram is kind of a disappearing chat app. There is an alternative collection method, unlike with Signal. So standard chats in Telegram may be collected via what's called Telegram for Desktop. It's Telegram's desktop API. But for encrypted data, manual collection, like screenshots, although we said those are not best evidence, if that's your only option, and we as experts can come in and defend why we did screenshots for a particular case, that was the last resort. That is what sometimes we do have to resort to for Signal and Telegram. You could have a third-party expert do those screenshots to own the burden of defensibility to prove, hey, these were not altered. They document how they collected them, keep them all in order. That is a last resort. So for Telegram, we have a little bit more leadway through that desktop app than we do for Signal to obtain them.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about mobile device analysis. So now that we have the collections done, again, just stressing what type of collections we have the advanced logical extraction where we're getting the typical user access data and then the full file system extraction, which is that comprehensive, deep analysis, pulling out system artifacts that the user typically doesn't see, and also that key chain for the encrypted applications. So let's talk a little bit about deleted messages. There is an analysis which is called lag analysis that we employ to essentially show what messages have been deleted and how it does this. When messages come in to your phone, it gets a sequence number inside the database table. So it starts at 1, goes to whatever. If a particular message is deleted, let's say it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it goes to 8. That means everything between there has been deleted. We know when 4 happened, we know when 8 happened. So we know that those messages were sent / received within that time window. So this is essentially giving you knowledge to the data gaps in your particular database. And these have been very helpful. We've had a couple of cases where we've had quite a few cases, but one in particular that we were able to use this type of analysis on to prove that messages were not deleted recently. So how that one worked was we received an iPhone to collect, which is the most current one, and we also received an old phone. Same, it's like your old phone and you transfer to your new phone. And we captured both of those. We were able to get full file systems of those so that we could see those databases the way we needed to in order to perform these types of analyses. And the other side's expert wrote an expert report saying that there had been 27,000 or so messages deleted recently. And he had all these reasons why that was true. Our examiner essentially went through and debunked that entire thing, showing that these particular gaps were not only on the new phone, but were on the old phone, which was 3 years old. So impossible that these exact same messages were deleted recently. Once we delivered our report, the other examiner retracted theirs and they dropped that. Called it a day.
Hey,
Client very
David,
happy.
we're gonna run out of time here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
There's a question. George Dowd has a question. Have you ever seen use of simplex chat, and would you have similar comments as you made regarding Signal? And also, can you talk a little about Proton Mail?
Sure. We have not run into simple chat, so I don't know what area of the particular phone it would be in. But if we were able to capture it and you're able to get a full file system, I have no doubt that it would be there. Depending upon what kind of chat application this is, it may be possible to grab that with an advanced logical or some type of backup. As far as Proton Mail goes, we do have connectors for Proton Mail that our examiners use, so it's typically not an issue to capture those, if that's what you were talking about as far as the Proton Mail goes.
George, do you have any follow-up with that? George Dowd?
No. I'm surprised by your answer related to Proton Mail because I thought it was encrypted at rest and in transit. So that's interesting to hear. Simplex chat, I have not used it either, but my understanding is that it's more secure, even than Signal, in that it's a no phone number required type of platform.
Okay. No, like I said, we haven't run into that one yet, but I'm definitely going to do some research on it now.
Hey, Dave, would you mind stop sharing?
Sure.
And now that you brought up Simple X Chat, we'll probably get a request for it this week because that's how things go. So then we'll report back.
Okay, we're going to start wrapping this up. On Tuesday, June 24th, we're going to be talking about business valuation for litigation. So mark your calendars. If you want CLE credit, send an email to the Northwest Suburban Bar Association with the subject line, thank you, NWSBA. Include your name, ARDC number, and the title of this presentation. And it goes to the email address is attendance@nwsba.org. So mark that down, send your email right away. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to invite everybody to comment. As always, we invite general comments from anybody. I especially welcome snide comments, or anything else anybody wants to say about this or anything else.
I'm going to share with Gio the slide deck so you can share that with anybody who wants it. I know we got cut off a little bit, so you're welcome to review those slides to see what other analyses and connections you can
Okay,
make.
we'll include that with the video.
Great.
Okay. Anybody else want to say anything? Come on. Bunch of lawyers have nothing to say.
I don't believe it.
Well, question for you, Stacy, is it Spurs or Knicks?
Oh my gosh. Is that a rhetorical question? Spurs.
Stacy's from Austin, Texas. So.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Come on now.
Anybody
Thank you for
else?
having us. Yeah.
Okay. Not even any smart ass remarks. Okay. All right. In that case, we're going to say adios. See you at the next one. Stacy, David, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you.
Look forward to working with you guys in the future again.
Yes, sir.
All right.